It was 06:05 on the morning of October 25, 1944, in the Surigao Strait, a narrow, ink-black passage of water between the Philippine islands of Leyte and Dinagat. The night was fading, but a profound pre-dawn darkness still clung to the hills and the sea. Aboard the USS West Virginia, a battleship resurrected from the mud of Pearl Harbor, Captain Herbert V. Wiley stood on the bridge, his senses tuned to the electric silence of the waiting fleet. To his front and flank, 5 other battleships, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, and Pennsylvania, lay in a devastating line across the northern exit of the strait. They were the hammer of an immense anvil, a battle line of a kind that would never form again in naval history. Their target was the southern force of the Imperial Japanese Navy, a desperate collection of battleships and cruisers under Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura, steaming single-mindedly north to attack the American invasion fleet in Leyte Gulf. The Americans had every advantage: radar, position, surprise. The Japanese had the darkness, but the darkness was a veil that American technology was about to shred. The West Virginia's modern SG surface search radar, a miracle of microwaves, had already painted the enemy at 42,000 yards, over 20 miles away. In the Japanese lookouts' binoculars, there was nothing but empty sea and the black loom of land. They could not see the battleship, but its 16-inch guns, computer-directed by radar data, fed into the Mark 8 fire control computer, already knew where they were. The West Virginia was a symbol of vengeance. Sunk at her berth on December 7, 1941, she had been raised, rebuilt, and modernized with the latest tools of destruction. Chief among them was the Mark 8 fire control radar, mounted high on her foremast. Unlike optical rangefinders, which were useless in darkness or smoke, the radar could see. It could measure the exact distance to a target with cold, electronic precision. That data was fed automatically into the ship's fire control computer, a room-sized mechanical analog brain of gears, cams, and synchros. This computer, operated by a team of specialists, continuously calculated the precise elevation and training for the massive 16-inch 45 caliber guns, factoring in the ship's own roll, pitch, wind, and even the curvature of the Earth. It turned the chaos of naval gunnery into a problem of applied ballistics. For the first time in history, a battleship could conduct long-range, accurate fire in total darkness. Down in the armored citadel of the ship, in Turret 2, the atmosphere was a mixture of focused routine and coiled tension. The turret captain, a chief petty officer named Miller, monitored his crew through an intercom. The 3 66-foot-long barrels, each weighing over 120 tons, were trained to starboard, silent, and dormant. Deep in the handling rooms below, powder men and projectile handlers stood by the massive hoists. The 2,700-pound armor-piercing shells, each as tall as a man and filled with high explosive, hung in their cradles. The silk powder bags, 6 per gun, waited in their brass cases. The process was ritualized, a liturgy of immense force. They had drilled for this moment for 2 years, from the shipyards of Puget Sound to the firing ranges of the Pacific. They were about to perform the ritual for real. On the bridge, Captain Wiley listened to the reports from Combat Information Center. The blips on the radar scope converged. Nishimura's force, the battleships Fuso and Yamashiro, the heavy cruiser Megami and 4 destroyers, was steaming into the perfect trap. American PT boats and destroyer squadrons had already harried them, torpedoing the Fuso and leaving her crippled and burning, a dying beacon in the night. Now, the heavy units were entering the final funnel. Admiral Jesse Oldendorf, commanding the American line, gave the order, "Open fire when ready." The West Virginia's main battery plotter fed the final solution to the computer. In Turret 2, a series of lights flashed from red to green. A low buzzer sounded. "Stand by," Chief Miller's voice crackled. The massive hydraulic rammers slid forward silently. "Mount." At 03:52, the world ended. The West Virginia's 8 16-inch guns erupted in a simultaneous, blinding cataclysm of light and sound. The orange fireball that lit the southern horizon was visible for 50 miles. The concussion wave hit the bridge like a physical blow, rattling fittings and pressing against chests. 900 pounds of propellant per gun had been converted, in a thousandth of a second, into pure force. The shells, each the size of a small car, were hurled into a parabolic arc that peaked miles above the Earth's surface. Inside the turret, The crew was slammed by the deafening roar and violent shock, their world reduced to the ringing in their ears and the immediate, automated sequence of reloading. For the Japanese aboard the flagship Yamashiro, the universe inverted without warning. One moment there was the darkness, the smell of salt and fuel oil, the vibration of the engines. The next, the sea around them simply exploded, not with the close, walking splashes of ranging shots, but with a sudden, terrifying curtain of towering water plumes and brilliant flashes that walked directly across their formation. There had been no warning gun flashes on the horizon, no sign of enemy ships. The first salvo was a full, devastating broadside from a perfectly computed solution. The darkness, their ally, had been betrayed. Admiral Nishimura on Yamashiro's bridge must have felt a cold dread. This was not a duel, it was an execution. His own optical rangefinders strained against the blackness, finding nothing. His guns were useless. He ordered a hard turn to port to present a narrower target and bring his own 14-inch guns to bear, but he was firing blind, aiming at muzzle flashes that appeared and disappeared instantly in the night. The American fleet was a ghost, striking from the void. The West Virginia fired again, and again. Her rate of fire for such massive weapons was a methodical, relentless 1 round per gun per minute. But she was not alone. The Tennessee and California, also equipped with modern radar fire control, joined in. The older Maryland, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania, using spotters and radar data from the lead ships, added their weight of shell. The sea around the Japanese force became a churning, exploding hell. The sheer volume of falling metal was apocalyptic. A 16-inch shell, traveling at over 2,500 feet per second, did not just hit a ship, it reorganized it. It could punch through over 20 inches of steel armor before detonating deep inside, where its explosive force would meet the confines of a magazine, an engine room, or a boiler. The Yamashiro was hit repeatedly. Witnesses on American ships saw huge, glowing geysers of flame erupt from her amidships and superstructure. A hit from the West Virginia or Tennessee likely destroyed one of her aft turrets, the blast vomiting fire hundreds of feet into the air. Secondary explosions rippled along her length as ready service ammunition for her anti-aircraft guns ignited. She began to burn from stem to stern, a magnificent, dying pyre in the center of the strait. Her sister ship, Fuso, already crippled, was finished off by this onslaught, breaking in two and sinking. The heavy cruiser Megami, her forward turrets smashed, turned to flee, but was relentlessly tracked by radar. Shells continued to fall around and upon her with mechanical precision. A destroyer, the Yamagumo, was hit by a salvo meant for a battleship and simply vaporized in a single, spectacular detonation. On the West Virginia, the process was coldly clinical. In the plotting room, men watched dials and repeated displays, calling out minor corrections. Up 50, right 100. The enemy was not a ship with men, but a set of coordinates, a target on a glowing green scope. The human element was in the sweating, deafened crews in the turrets, ramming home another 2,700-pound shell, closing the breach with a heavy clang and waiting for the next earth-shattering lurch. By 0409, just 17 minutes after the first salvo, the battle was effectively over. The Japanese southern force had been annihilated. The Yamashiro, a burning wreck, capsized and sank with Admiral Nishimura and most of her crew. The Megami, a floating inferno, would be scuttled later. The American battle line ceased fire. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the noise. In the pre-dawn gloom, the Surigao Strait was lit by the funeral pyres of the Japanese fleet. Captain Wiley ordered a ceasefire. The West Virginia had fired 93 rounds of 16-inch ammunition. Post-battle analysis and later archaeological surveys of the wrecks suggest her radar-directed fire was astonishingly accurate, likely scoring the majority of the crippling hits on the Yamashiro. She had done what no battleship had ever done before, deliver a killing blow from over the horizon in total darkness against an enemy who never saw her coming. It was the pinnacle and the epitaph of battleship gunnery. The era of the dreadnought had begun with a vision of line-of-sight duels between floating fortresses. It ended in the Surigao Strait with a ghost ship, resurrected from the past, using the tools of the future to write a final, devastating footnote in naval history. The Japanese fleet sailed into the dark, believing it was hidden. They were wrong. The dark had eyes, and those eyes were made of radar waves and calculating gears, and they were the last thing the Yamashiro ever saw.